Well, hello. Today we're going to talk a little bit about gradation, which is one of our principles and from our principles and elements of art and design. In this video, or I might have to do a few videos, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about gradation, but I'm going to more show you the assignments and how to do them. So you can review the written material to go further into what about gradient, but I wanted these videos to be more technical videos for you. Okay, so I will start off with some text, which is this assignment. This series of assignments that we're doing is a gradient series where we're going to do a series of work where we're exploring what gradient really is and how we use it. And quickly to say, in this work, we're talking about gradient of not only value, like dark to light, but also a gradual change, such as a gradual change from a small shape or form to a large shape or form. Okay, so I'm gonna share screen for a moment to show you a little bit of text before we get into the examples of what we're going to do. So again, when we're talking about gradient, we're not only talking about that gradual change from, for example, from darkness to light. We can also be adding color to that, which is something we will be doing. But we're also talking about how that gradual change can happen with shapes and forms and textures. Okay, and relating this to space, distance, and atmosphere. Okay, so I have the handout available to you, so you can always view it. And I definitely will be assigning you some reading in class, or for outside of class time. But I want to use this video to really go into some of the technical things that we're doing. So what we're going to be making are a few things. The first one is this. So when we look at this, immediately some people might say, okay, well, this is from dark to light, and this is a grayscale. And that is exactly what it is, but it's more, right? When we look at this, we don't just see that we see black moving and gradually and becoming white, but we see the shapes, which in this case are squares, that are going from large to small. So we always want to have that consciousness that gradient is not always tied to the value scale. Okay, and so we're going to do this, and we're going to do this in Photoshop. Okay, so I'm going to switch this screen to our Photoshop screen. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to get us to my Photoshop, and I'm going to pull out our gradient. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So what you're seeing here is similar to the piece that I just showed you, except this is a piece that I made, and if you were in class, we did it together in class so that you learned it, but you may need a refresher, or you may not have been there. Okay, so in this piece, what we're seeing, let me bring this up a little bit. What we're seeing is a series of layers, right, that are making up our black. So I'm going to slowly begin to take these away. There we go. And you'll see the squares. And we're using squares. And in this case, we're using 17 of them. Okay, so we have actually, looks like we have 18 layers here, but let me see. Yep, we're using 18 at this time. Okay, so in order to start this, I'm going to get a new layer, a new document, and I'm going to size it 7 by 7 inches, and I'm going to have my resolution at 150. So we know at 150 we can print these out. 300 is great to print out too, but we didn't want the files that heavy, and we are going to do a series of these. Okay, so we start off and we see that the first thing we get on our layers is our background layer that Photoshop gives to us by default. So with that, I'm going to actually double click to unlock that. And I can keep it at layer 0. I like to actually label them number 1 because those numbers 1 and up are going to coincide with my gradient scale, and I'll be able to quickly count to make sure that I'm doing my grayscale correctly. So I recommend that you actually use the numbers 1, 2, and 3 instead of 0. So I have my document here. I labeled my first. Now, in order to put in the colors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to get to your swatches. So when you're in Photoshop, you may see your colors like this. If you don't see your colors at all, you can go up to Windows and on Menu and click on Color. Once you have color, go ahead and switch to swatches. When you switch to swatches, you may see this, which is RGB folder, CMYK, and then we'll get to grayscale. The grayscale is what we're concerned with today. And we see how we have from our darkest dark, our darkest black, and it goes all the way up. I think we have about 20 shades here. And we're not going to use all 20. At the very most, we'll use 17. But we're going to start from our darkest dark and work our way up. So I'm going to click on that so that I know that I have it selected. I'm just on my first layer, and I'm simply going to choose my bucket tool. Now I'm going to push it to gradient so that you see, sometimes your bucket tool, you'll see gradient and you'll have to click and select your bucket tool from there. So that's what I did. I have my first color, or my first swatch, which is black. I switch very often to my move tool when I'm not doing certain things because I really don't want to end up clicking on something by mistake using my bucket tool, because that would make a bigger mess, right? And let me see. There we go, just so we can have some more space. And I always like to have my navigation, my navigator window tool out as well. Okay, so now I have this, and what I want to do is use this as the base and then begin to build those smaller colors, those smaller shades. So another thing that I'm going to do is go to View, because I want to do 2 things here. I want to go and get my grid, which is View, Show, and Grid, and it will show me my grid here. And then I want to go back to View and go down to Ruler so that I can see my ruler. Right now the ruler is in pixels, and I'm going to right click to put it in inches. Okay, the grid that we have here by default will be in basically quarters of an inch. Okay, and I have my black, as I said, on the layers. Now I'm gonna duplicate layer. So I'm right clicking and then over the layer. Notice I'm not right clicking right here because I'll end up having to renaming my piece. I'm not right clicking here. I'm right clicking over to the right so that I can easily see duplicate layers when I right click. And this is where I'll change that number to 2. So what I've done is just duplicate the layer, right? And what I'm going to do now is click on the next swatch down, which is when I count, I can go 1, 2, which is why we want to really keep these numbered correctly. I'm going to get my bucket tool. Remember, shortcuts for the tools are right there so that you can see them. So if I want to do a shortcut for bucket, I'll just click on G on my keyboard. Now, I just clicked to put in the next gray, right? So that gray is about 5% lighter than the 100% gray. Okay, so this is a 95% gray here. Now I'm going to go back to my move tool. Remember, that's V. And I'm going to bring in this by clicking on my show transform tool. Remember, I'm in the move tool, which is why I can see that. I'm going to deselect auto select because sometimes that will cause a problem. You'll think you're on something and you won't be on it. So now I'm going to hold down the shift because I'm just going to move in this. You would think that you could do it with just letting it scale evenly for you, but I found that it didn't always work well. So I just did it myself. So again, everything is snapping to the grid so that when I'm scaling in, it just scales in for me and I hit return. So what has happened now is I have 2 layers here, one layer with the black value at 100% and the next layer at the black at 95%. So this is becoming our grays. The next thing I do, I'm going to right click and duplicate layer, right? And I'm going to call that 3. Okay. And that's going to help me tremendously because if I go 1, 2, 3, I know that that's the third gray that I need, which is at 90%, right? So we're going to increments of 5. I get my bucket tool. I know I have it selected and I just click. I tend to recommend to click in the center, right? So now we can start seeing that color transformation happen for us. What I'm going to do now is go back to that move tool and hold down the shift so I can bring that back some so that now, and again, this will be subtle, you'll be able to see all 3 of the swatches that I've created. Again, I'm going to go back and right click and duplicate layer again. I'm going to call this one 4. So again, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, so I don't have to remember. If I make a mistake, I can just count so I can check myself, right? So I'm at 4. I selected that. I can click on the G or I can click on the button, on the bucket tool button. And now I have my next one down. Okay, I'm going to switch to my move tool, hold down the shift, and bring it down again. Okay, so I'm bringing down the size of the square each time, hitting return. Now, I'm going to right click. So I'm going to do this a few times. So, which works nice because if you didn't get it the first time, you're seeing me do it repeatedly. I'm not going to do it 15 or 17 times because I know at some point you're going to understand, okay, she's doing this. So in that talking, I had to make sure I'm on the 5th layer, which means I should be on 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th gradation of gray. So once I get that, I'm going to drop it right in the center, switch to my move tool, hold down my shift key so I can scale this in 1/4 of an inch, because again, that's what the grid is by default, which works out perfect for us. Okay, so I'm continuing to get this. I'll do one more. Right click and I go to duplicate. So remember, I'm right there. I select 6 so it knows I'm doing 6. I can come here and collect the 6th one in from the bottom, get my bucket tool and click. From there, I'll get my move tool and I'll hold down the shift and bring it in. Okay, so I would do this about somewhere between 15 and 17. So you have about 15 and 17 layers of what we're doing. So I'm gonna shut all these off. I'm gonna take off the grid just so that you can see what I'm doing, but you can keep your grid on. Okay, so I'm gonna go again to view, show, and grid, just to take it off. And so I'm gonna show you, we have our black, we have the gray, the 95% gray, and then we get to 90% gray, then we get to 85% gray, 80, 75, and we would keep going until, not that one, I'll show you one that's a little bit more complete here, until we get fully done. Okay, so do this as your first piece and save it, and you're going to label it grayscale gradation. Okay, all right. Now, if you got that far, make sure that you're saving your work. It is very important that you save this and label it. The next thing that I'm going to do is actually duplicate this, which is under image in the menus, and I'm going to click duplicate because this one is going to be monochromatic. Now, you may recall that that monochromatic is just one color. You really don't need black and whites and grays to do monochromatic. Monochromatic means mono, one, chromatic color. So when we do this, we're going to use our blend modes. So first thing we're going to do is get a new layer. So I'm just going to bring this up so I can see, and get a new layer at the top, at the very top. And I think I just have one layer that I'm going to delete in front of this just so that you don't get confused. So this is an empty layer, and I'm going to click on my little swatch here, and I'm going to choose red. I want to try to choose something pure, but doesn't have a lot of lights, a lot of blacks and whites in it, just this pure hue. And on that empty layer, I'm just going to click. Well, I'm going to try to click with my bucket tool. Okay. And once I do that, it covers up all that beautiful work that we just did. So remember, you did a duplicate. So you still have that gradation one. This is a copy of it. So I have this red here. I'm going to switch out of the bucket tool to the move tool. And I'm going to go to normal, where it says normal. These are your blend modes, okay? And the blend modes work really great with blacks, whites, and grays, okay? So I have the red layer selected, and you can see the different looks it would get. And in this case, I scrolled all the way down to select color. So what blend mode has done was it has blended the red with all of those shades and values, and all of the values of our gradation here. Okay, so now we have something that is monochromatic, and as I said, it could have just been one color with no black and whites and grays, but it can also be one color with black, whites, and grays, because we know that the blacks and whites and grays and browns, for that matter, are considered neutrals. So now we have our nice monochromatic. Remember to save your work, okay? Now, I'm going to go from there to showing you difference, okay? So difference, we're going from monochromatic And so I am going to go back to my red. So where you see this green here, I'm going to click on my red and I'm going to use my bucket tool and put it here. Okay, so that you can see what I did. So I'm going to go back to color so you can see that that's what we just did. And you saw me do that. But now instead of color, I'm going to click on difference so that you can see that. And then you're going to save this. Okay. So far we have the gradient grayscale one. We have the color from our color blend mode. From our blend mode, we select color. That's another one. So that was 2. And this third one is difference, right? And so we're going to save this. Now the next one, I'm going to duplicate my layer. I'm going to duplicate my document. And instead of difference, I'm going to call it subtract. And hit OK. And so I'm going to move this from difference to subtract. Okay. And then I will save this. So now you have difference, you have subtract, you have monochromatic, and you have gradient scale. Those are all separate documents that you are saving. Okay. So we're at about 4 now. I'm going to close this video out and then start another video to go into the next few pieces of this series. Okay.